Hey, what's up, comrades? We got a few more of these kind of events that not the anniversary events, just kind of regular events that are like story tie that I'm going to try to jam in here as we proceed through like the main story chapters, because there's stuff that becomes relevant. I want to try to make sure we cover that before we get to it in the main story, so stuff makes more sense, right? Now, there's a lot of these. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of them, but I'm doing what I can. All right, so we're going to start with Over the Horizon, which is the event for Sora, one of the best characters in this game, sex appeal-wise, and she is one of my top waifus from this game. Sora is excellent in every possible way. She's like, her character design, her fucking like summer skin, her like attitude, her just like raw sex appeal. She is fucking excellent. And I'm not even a fan of like big-breasted characters necessarily. I know that sounds ridiculous because I have Sora here and then I also have Naga, but they are exceptions to the rule. But they are fucking amazing. Okay, so Sora here, my delightful waifu. We're actually going to talk about our Bond story first, because according to the fandom, that takes place before the Over the Horizon story, and I just default to that because whatever, fuck it. So the story starts off. We as the commander are wandering around the park, and then we see this woman tossing paper airplanes around, right, with a bunch of little kids. And so we kind of wander up because one of the paper airplanes that we find is made of like real fucking paper, which is like a big deal, right? Because the Ark and like real stuff is like hard to find because they don't have like real shit to process paper and all that stuff. Anyway, so we go up and we chat with her about it, and then she challenges, she flirts with us and says like, oh, you came over here to get my number, didn't you sly fox? And then we're like, no, blah, blah, blah. And then we eventually get conned into doing like a paper airplane contest. Whoever make the best paper airplane that can go the furthest gets like whatever they wish and desire. So as we start like working on that, all the orphans want to join too, and so they start getting involved. And then after the competition, the orphans end up like winning. And so their wish is for hamburgers from Cosmo Burger, right? Which is like the McDonald's of the Nikke universe. That's right. All right, let's go. So Sora and Sora comes with us as we go, and then she's flirting some more and talking about the kids and all that stuff. And then after everything is like ordered, we also have a conversation about like the kids being orphans because like they're like enthralled by this, like just making paper airplanes in the park, and they're enthralled with like just getting like a Happy Meal essentially. And Sora's like, yeah, I'd like to go play with them, blah blah blah. Again, she's peak. And so she then cons us, being like, oh, I'm so tired, my hands are so sore from paper airplanes, so you got to carry all the bags and whatnot. Because our hands are full and we're hungry, she starts hand feeding us like fries and stuff, and then a burger, and then it becomes a whole thing because the burger she gives us is like super spicy, which I don't know why we got this for fucking orphans, but it is. And then she gets juice on her hand, and then she's licking the juice, and then we're all getting like flustered, not from like the raw sexuality of the encounter, but because of the spice and whatnot. And then when we get back to the park, she takes us aside, takes our phone and writes her number in there, and then gives it back to us and like smooches our phone and says, give me a call, big fella, and then takes all the food to the orphans. As we pull out her phone to like see what's going on, we find that she also left her paper airplane with like her like, I'm trying to remember what the comment was, but she has like a saying that it's like over the horizon, blah, blah, blah. And so she has that written on there. And so we text her immediately and have a conversation about how we want to get together. And she talks about like the surface at some point and how the surface is so much better than the artificiality of like the Ark, which is for realsies. And so we decide to, through our chatting or whatever, we decide we're going to go on a date to the surface so we can see like the real sky and stuff. So we go out there and we notice that this paper that, the paper plane that we brought out and stuff, it's been used multiple times, right? And so Sora continuously, since it's such a rare resource, she's continuously like reusing it and like refolding and keeping it like preserved. And then, she pulls it out and like is messing with it and sees that like it's still the original one that she like wrote her stuff on, and she's like very turned on by this and whatnot. And then she talks about how beautiful the sky is on the surface. Now it's so much better than the Arcs. And then we like hold hands and throw the airplane together and watch it go like over the horizon, right? And that's the whole thing. And then we fuck in my head. So that's her pawn story. All right, on to the event here. So we start off, is it called Over the Horizon? I think it is. We start off over the horizon. There's some like pre-flight preparations going on. Sora is sitting next to us and like shamelessly flirting with us, like touching, leaning over, lingering touches, all that stuff. And the counters are all getting like very upset that Sora is being so close and stuff, particularly Rappy, of course. And then we start thinking about how exhausting the events of the past week were and how they've all led to like this moment. And then there's like a whole bunch of shit goes down real quick. And we think back to the moment this all began. And so then we jump like a week back. And so a week prior in the outpost, we received these like confusing orders for flight training, and we're like, flight training? The fuck do we need flight training for? And this gets Rappy and Anise to explain that there's like a new air transportation is like essential for large scale operations and for emergency deployments and stuff. And we have no memory of this or any like past flight training, despite surviving a fucking transport flight crash at the beginning of the game. But apparently it's necessary. So a week later, we meet up with Over the Horizon Squad, which includes Cello, who is this stacked blonde lady. And then there's Sky, who is peak character fucking design. She is excellent across the board. And then, of course, Sora, who we've met before in the park when we were out doing stuff, whatever. And she is extremely suggestive about stuff and keeps referring to us as Captain, which annoys Rappy and Anise very much. We talk about like all the stuff that's going on and how we're going to do like some classroom flight training in there. And so while we're in there doing flight training, Sora like holds our hand and whispers to us, which really distracts Rappy and Anise from the lesson. Neon's like super into it, and so she's taking everything like super serious, like, which is kind of funny for her. The instructors are Cello and Sky, and they reveal that their squad's true long-term goal is actually to fly the plane, the Wings of Victory, out on the surface to help fight back the Rapture Horde. So it's very similar to, what's it called? The Admiral, with like helm and mast and anchor. I'm like really brain fog lately. Aegis, they're Aegis. Okay. And all that stuff. So the Wings of Victory is similar to that, but it's a plane. So then the plane can go on the surface, fight raptures, and do all that cool stuff. And that it specifically is set up to fight back Stormbringer and any other like aviated or like flying raptures that may be around. But right now they're just running like these very tightly guarded like transport flights carrying goods back and forth to different places. And then they also reveal that there's been some discrepancies in stuff that they're bringing in. So there's clearly like some smuggling things going on. In fact, there's like a smuggling ring supposedly, and it's causing a lot of problems with like Dark leadership and stuff. And at some point, Sora, who keeps like flirting with us and touching us and getting closer and closer, gets Anise to like freak out, which stops, it like derails the whole lecture and everything. And so then Sky's like, all right, whatever, let's just cut this shit short and go through the simulation. And the flight simulation can really be like no joke. Like there's like flight simulation, like you're practicing. So I have some military helicopter training, but there's some like machines you do as part of flight training and stuff that are just like, oh, I'm flying a fucking helicopter and all that good stuff, and it's fun and it's very realistic in a lot of ways, like the whole cockpit and everything. But then there's also like a chamber you go to, because if you go up and down like too fast, you can get like, it can really like fuck you up. And so there's like some additional training to see how you're going to do when like you're twisting around or moving around. There's like little machines and like a big machine, and people pass the fuck out, like no joke, because you want to see what it's like to like spin out of control and like completely lose like G's and all that kind of good stuff. And so what happens here soon. So we go and we get set up in the simulation room, which is where the story starts actually. And Sora continues to aggressively flirt and be Sora, which is awesome. And this continues to get the counters to be like very upset about the whole situation, until finally she's like forced to back off. She clarifies that she's just like teasing us and that there's nothing really that serious going on, but there is. And that she generally has like a desire to keep us all safe and to make sure that we're okay, because she's like the flight attendant or whatever of the crew. And then she kind of hints at the Bond story about like who took who flying for the first time and all that stuff, which again, the counters are not a super big fan of that. Sky, who is the pilot, then takes control of the simulation and gives like a warning that nothing will stop the simulation from going. Like once they get started, they cannot stop, and that there is possibility for motion sickness. And so, and then there's also some hints that she is like kind of wild in piloting. And then they take off right in the simulation, and there's like this whole chaotic takeoff, and it quickly escalates into like absolute madness. Sky like blasting music and starts like a mid-flight rapture attack and all this stuff, and the violent shaking and triggers and all this stuff. And finally, we're like, besides just being like sick, we get some like flashbacks to like when we crashed and when we were a rookie, like at the very beginning of the game. Oh no, I forgot to mention this. All this Bond story and stuff, this takes place like super early. Like it takes place before Rappy became Rappy Red Hood and all that stuff. It takes place like super early on, like chapter 6 or something. Anyway. And so then we start to like really like hyperventilate and like start to kind of like pass out and stuff. And so Sora quickly covers us both with a blanket and administers mouth-to-mouth resuscitation under the guise of like emergency air supply. She just wanted to make out some more. What a babe. And finally that kind of stabilizes our breathing and whatnot. And then she gives us a mild sedative as well and stays by our side the whole time to like comfort us and chats with us softly about the value of food in the Ark before we drift off to sleep. Following that intense experience, Sky apologizes for, getting carried away by piloting and talking about how she wants to pilot some more. We actually wake up in an infirmary. And so we tell her like, no, it's cool. Like I'm glad you're energetic and the rock music and everything. And it kept things like very grounded. Sora then teases Sky for falling for the captain so easily before reminding her that she has a whole bunch of reports to write out. And then once Sky leaves and it's just Sora and us, she expresses her gratitude. Or we express our gratitude for Sora for everything she was doing, for the sleeping pill that aided in our recovery and everything. And then she ensures us that our complexion is improved and that with some good rest, we'll be okay. She then leaves the room. Shortly thereafter, our phone buzzes, and we get a baffling text from Sora. And the text talks about, like, like they're very suspicious, and they talk about meeting up later, and about, like, the goods, and the goods are here, and stuff, and, like, sneaking past security and all this stuff, and, like, a rendezvous time and whatnot. And then we recall like how Cello was talking earlier about smuggling and the smuggling ring and like inventory discrepancies and all that stuff. And we start to conclude that Sora might be involved in like the smuggling ring and somehow, and that she might be like a prime suspect or whatever. And so we get kind of concerned because she is so nice and sweet, and we definitely fucked her in their Bond story. And then all this evidence, so we want to like, instead of telling anybody, we want to go figure out what's going on. So we follow the message to where it's supposed to go. And we're able to codes, taking clock maps like completely. Oh, we're like track down maintenance codes for like it's like something like G15 or something. And we're getting like really frustrated. So we're about to call somebody to help, but we don't want to like turn Sora in. We want to kind of figure out what's going on. And then as we're like trying to figure out what to do and trying to figure out how to get into this thing or whatever, we realized that we were using like old codes or something. And then we overhear Sora talking to somebody about like using a different storage room or something, and how we like misunderstood like what exactly we're supposed to be in. So then we were able to get like into like the actual storage area. She's supposed to meet up with somebody. And so we go in there and we hide just right before she enters. Then our phone like almost betrays us, or like our position, because it's like beeping again, because she's like, where the fuck are you, yada yada yada. And so we pretend to be the guy she's supposed to meet up with, and we're like, oh hey, sorry, I can't meet you right there, and we'll have to reschedule. And she's like, all right, yeah. So 3 days go by and there's like complete silence, and then Sora starts texting us again, and it's a new meeting point. It's like 3 p.m. at the Cosmo Burger, right, the great Cosmo Burger. So we get super concerned about being recognized. And so we convince like the counters to help us like disguise and like sunglasses and a trench coat and a wide brim hat, like come on, along with a fake mustache, I'm pretty sure. And so we're out at the Cosmo Burger, like eating our little meal or whatever, like our happy meal in our like poor disguise. And we spot Sora. She enters, she orders some food. She's like trying to text us, like her client, but actually us, to meet her at the park instead, because it's like too many people here or something. And so we have to like rush. We have to eat all our food real quick and rush out the door. And so we tail Sora for a while through the streets. We endure judgmental stares from onlookers because our costume is like completely absurd and whatnot. And then we see Sora who had ordered a whole bunch of food from Cosmo Burger. She's now, giving it out to like the orphan children from like the Bond story, right? And we think about like playing paper airplanes with her and stuff. And it's like there's a conflict of like, is she smuggling stuff? She has got like such a kind heart. She's looking after orphans. She like buys them food and all this stuff. And then we get texted again. And she's like, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to move to a new location. And so we follow her to like this location that she mentioned. And we see it leads us right into the outer rim. Like she walks up to the gate and then she heads on in and we're like, oh fuck, what are we going to do here? So once we get over to the outer rim, we take off our disguise because there's like shady people like watching us and whatnot. And we notice we're like kind of very sneakily, but very poorly sneakily tracking Sora as she's wandering around. And she just seems to be like whistling and like having a great time and doesn't seem like to care at all. And which makes it easy to follow her, right? And so as we continue to push further in, it gets darker and darker and stuff. And then all of a sudden, we turn a corner and we find the alleyway completely empty. And the singing stopped, and we're like, oh shit, what happened? And then Sora like leaps on us from behind and tackles us to the ground. And of course, she's just a chick with giant breasts, but she's a Nikke, so she weighs a lot. So she's very easily able to like subdue us. So pinned beneath her in a dark alleyway in like a very sexy scene, she confronts us, or we confront her with the message chains and everything, and accusing her of using Over the Horizon to like smuggle illegal goods and all the secure facilities and whatnot, that we caught her red-handed and whatnot. And then she mentioned some joke about having to permanently silence us at this point because we've like found her out or whatever. But then quickly shifts back to like being Sora, right? And playfully showing saying that she wants to show us something cool in exchange for our absolute discretion. And so we decide like, fuck it, this is what we do. So we're going to just follow her and see what her true motives are. And then she kisses us before helping us up and getting us to her secret sanctuary. So Sora leads us to a dilapidated building housing a hidden high-risk surface elevator, which is, there's all these elevators like in the outer rims, how people get to the surface and that. So, and these elevators, were reminded that these are used by collectors who are scavengers in the outer rim who go to the surface to bring stuff like scrap metal and stuff so they can sell it for money and whatnot. And so we head up to the surface with her, and the Sora starts telling about her past, revealing that she was an orphan who was raised in the Outer Rim, who joined Over the Horizon out of lifelong childhood fascination with the sunlight and sky, right? Like the hope that she could get out of not only the slums, but that she could go do something in her life and see the surface and whatnot. And then she like gets embarrassed and hopes that we will like not judge her for her like criminal activity or whatever. And then out on the surface, she leads us through to a camouflaged barrier of scrap metal into a hidden outpost. And inside the outpost is all these like blueprints and data focusing on the Wings of Victory, the legendary first invasion airship that the forces of the Ark used that was scrapped a long time ago under the threat of the Stormbringer. She then confesses that she deliberately sent the messages to us to try to recruit us to help to her cause, because she's driven by like her collector's intuition, right? She's been doing these collecting things. She's not actually smuggling anything at all. And that it was love at first sight, and told us that we're uniquely like then she kind of goes into like dick riding, not literal, but how we're like a great leader and we always trust Nikkes and we always listen to their stories and take care of them and we're so sweet and all this stuff. And then she points out that like, oh snap, I misspoke a few seconds ago. She actually does smuggle stuff. She smuggles medical supplies and food, and explains that she operates this ring solely to sustain the collectors, because part of what she's striving to do is get these collectors to find information out about the Wings of Victory. Because they've been like lost out on the surface, and she wants people to live in the light and be able to have access to all this stuff and whatnot. So she's utilizing this stuff to help the collectors gather like pre-Ark stuff so that eventually we can get back on the surface and utilize all this stuff and whatnot. And then we're moved by her conviction, obviously, and all the sacrifices that she's made, and all the sacrifices of the people that the collectors that they've gathered here in this like hideaway and whatnot. And so we agree that we will not tell anybody about it, and we'll keep her operation a secret from the central government. But in return, Sora promises to abandon the criminality the moment they finally fly together beyond the brilliant horizon on the wings of freedom. And that wraps up the main course of Over the Horizon. So in the epilogue, sometime like a bit later, an unannounced amount of time later, in the over-the-horizon offices, Sora is fondly scrolling through the protagonist's profile on blah, 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 or whatever, when Sky and Cello excitedly bring news of a breaking news broadcast. The report reveals, for the first time in a century, land on the surface has been permanently reclaimed from the Raptures, right? So it's talking about us. So this is like bringing us kind of like more up to the modern, where we're at in the chapters, right? Because first reclamation site. And this is a historic triumph, and achieved entirely by the Counters and Captain, which is us. And then as they celebrate this incredible feat, Sora's phone buzzes with an urgent call from one of her like collector contacts in the field, and she opens up the attachment, and with this has like freshly sent like photographs and whatnot, and her face is like, holy shit, we did it. And then she starts like crying and stuff, and then she's staring because the picture is a half-buried airship, and she realizes that they finally discovered the legendary Wings of Victory, so they can dig it up and then they can use it, which we'll get to later in the main chapter stories, which is why I wanted to talk about this now. All right, so go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.